Welcome. Today is Thursday, December 21st, 2017. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting. The first item on our agenda is a Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Looks like we are missing a member. And is that are we expecting her or not?
Yes, I believe she announced that she would not be here today.
She will not be here.
Commissioner Andrews is absent.
Okay. So we have 4 members present, so we can take business. Next item is, the first item on the action agenda is approval of action minutes for November 16th, 2017. Are there any additions or corrections? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
You want to open it up to the public too, just in case.
What's that?
Open it up to the public if they have any corrections.
All right. I've not done that before, so I will do that now.
Sorry, I probably should.
Does the public have any additions or corrections to our minutes from the last meeting? Seeing no action from the floor, I will entertain a motion to pass the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one. Passes 4-0. The next item on the agenda is hearing from the public any items that we are not specifically discussing today. Please come to the microphone and mention what you'd like to talk about. And we'd like to limit that to 3 minutes, but I'm not seeing a lot of movement in the audience there. Oh, there's somebody. Okay, great. And please introduce yourself and your address, please.
Yes, my name's Dale Franklin. I have a business at 571 Searles Avenue, and it's right next to item number 2 on your 569 Searles.
Right. Are you going to speak about 569 Searles Avenue?
I'm going to talk about 75 Boast and 569. Is
Okay,
it not appropriate right now?
Yeah, we're talking about things that are not on our agenda. Those are agendized items
Okay,
at this point.
I'll wait.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else like to speak to something not on our agenda currently? Seeing no one, we'll move on to item number 2. And we are going to get a little introduction from the city planner, please.
Yes, these were our two manufacturing applications for 569 Searles Avenue and 75 Boast Avenue. We had initially anticipated having those reviews here tonight at this afternoon's meeting, but based on advice from our consulting council, based on review time from staff and our fire department and others, she advised that it was best that we postpone it, and I have advised the 2 applicants, and I see at least one of them here, but we're anticipating that these will be heard at the January meeting instead, but because I did send out notices 10 days in advance, I have advised the commission that if there's anyone here to talk about those applications, that they can still provide public comment at this time.
So is there a representative from the number 2 item 569 Searles?
So Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'd like to maybe make public a statement that I've shared with each of you about my interests in this item. Is this the appropriate time to do that?
This would be an appropriate time.
Yeah. So as I communicated with you all the first time that one of these, the first time this item came up maybe 2 months ago, I am a board member and a principal for an organization called Growing Community, which was an applicant for the medical cannabis dispensary application. And I just sort of want to, so that's an uncompensated position, and it will always be one according to our bylaws. So I don't have a financial interest in in the MCD permit, and certainly not in the associated related cannabis business permits. But I do feel that that it's important for me to recuse myself from these from any of the cannabis related items, and recognize that that creates a bit of a burden on the city, on our planning commission, because of the absence of one of the members to sort of hear and consider what will be, I think, a long list of these items that will be coming forward in the coming months. But I wanted to just make that announcement that I've made to you all and the staff publicly, and again, just for the sake of perception, I think it's best to recuse myself from all of those matters. And given that this isn't on the agenda, I don't know if that means, I mean, I'm happy to excuse myself and not listen to public comments, or since there seems to be no action, if I'm really not, I'll do whatever's advised on that front.
If I may, Chair, there's no action being taken today. So, I think if we wanted to not have Commissioner Rainey participate in any discussion that might incur, but I think today is really just a matter of listening to the public, and those are all public comments. So I don't see a problem with Commissioner sitting for the public commentary.
I'm not personally motivated to send him back in at this point. If that's, I think it's fine.
Provided we're not going to be discussing it at the table. But I mean, ultimately it's up to you to decide.
Yeah. We are not going to be discussing it at the table, correct?
We're not going to be taking action.
There's no action. I wouldn't think that there's any. I'm only advising that there be public comment taken because of the notice that came out. I wouldn't advise there be any discussion at the table.
Okay. Then,
Get comfy.
okay, thank you.
So, bearing that, is there a representative from 569 Searles Group, 569 Searles Avenue, who would like to speak? And not seeing anybody, would anybody from the public like to speak on 569 Searles Avenue? This is the time.
Again, my name is Dale Franklin, and I have an established business at 571 Searles. I'm concerned that things are evolving in society. The outgrowth of some of these cannabis-related businesses may very well have an effect on me. At City Council, I made a statement and tried to explain how it would. But what I am is a manufacturing business. We make aerospace parts. We make aircraft parts. In the course of doing that, we have federal agents that come in and out of my place of business, third-party audits, source inspectors. They survey me for quality control. And this could influence them and how they evaluate me for contracts that I receive, that I have been receiving. And a clinic is one thing, but now I'm finding out that it's going to turn into a complete, or possibly a cannabis campus, manufacturing all sorts of cannabis products. And then as well, I may not be in order to speak about a processing plant right directly behind me that's going to be processing for oils for medical purposes. The smell, it could be a real problem with that if the raw product isn't contained. Those are the items that concern me about my business, and I could go into great detail how this would directly affect me. The other things are just general observations that I have looking out my front office every day. I see children walking back and forth with their school books and everything. I know we have youth-oriented businesses, the karate school, 3 dance schools. within the vicinity there of what's going to happen. I'm a little concerned about that. And I just, from the day that Elevation 24/7 came into my office for a meet and greet, I think that was part of their obligation in the process. And now I reflect what's happening there. It was misrepresentation. It was represented as it was just going to be a clinic, a medical clinic. And now it may be a part and parcel of a whole group of people moving in there with the sale of the health club. This is really going to impact me. And I just think that we just be cautious and look at and understand all these things. It's a tough job for you guys to evaluate, to actually move or displace businesses to accommodate new ones. Or if there's compromises that can be made, I don't know. But I just want my side of the story out there. And, I try to be amenable in society as I do business with everybody. And I want to be, but you have to hear my side of the story, have this information, you must have it. So that's what I'm trying to do. If you have any questions, give me a call. I'll explain to you in greater detail why this would affect me. This has to do with the federal agents that I deal with making aircraft parts, and the FAA in particular. And we're watched very closely for the safety of everybody that uses the aircraft. Everybody, passengers, One of my parts, if they fail, could endanger all the passengers. They're in actuators and the brakes and control surface actuators. And so it's pretty critical. And how this is going to impact me, I don't know precisely exactly. And I may never even really know if they just exclude me from the contracts. But the potential there is to really upset my business. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on the business at 569 Searles Avenue?
Hi, my name is Joe Bundy. I live at 73 Mine Rock Road, Nevada City. And my brother Kevin and I are going to be local business owners, hopefully, here in the city. And a non-public facing business, but we're familiar with 24/77, 24/77, and the odor issues and security issues. We know that he's put a lot of effort and time into mitigating those and make sure that those are not a problem. I've got a young daughter in my home, and so security and those kinds of issues are paramount to me, and Daniel's made it very clear that those are paramount to him as well. So I just wanted to say we're in favor of the business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on 569 Searles Avenue? Not seeing anybody else, and having agreed not to discuss this at the table since it's a non-action item, we are going to move on. I'm going to close that one. We're going to move on to item number 3, 75 Post Avenue, Floor C Incorporated. Is there anybody here who would like to speak to 75 Post Avenue?
I'll address it. My name is Harry Bennett. I'm the president of Floor C Inc., and we've applied for a license for 75 Post, and I want to thank you all again for doing all the work. When we got the application in, we realized it was kind of a push for everybody with this time of year and being new business to get onto this agenda, so we totally understand that. But we are looking forward to giving you a presentation on January 18th. And I just want to address the gentleman here to let him know that under Nevada City's ordinance, as well as the state, there are very strict odor control, security systems that we have to abide by. So there will be, you won't know the difference from looking at our place or smelling our place compared to our neighbors, one which is a commercial winery and the other is a dog groomer. And you won't know what we do. Kids going by aren't going to have any idea what we do. All of myself and my partners, we're all parents. I've raised a kid here from NCE all the way through Sierra College. We care about that too, and just want to, we're looking forward to doing business here in Nevada City with people I've known for 30 years and see on the streets, and we hope to add to the economic viability of Nevada City, and looking forward to support Nevada City on the tax measure coming up in June. And I just want to thank you again and hope everyone has a happy holiday and everything. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Hey guys, Daniel Batchelor. I have a business at 569 Searles Avenue. I'd just like to speak in favor of all these businesses that are coming up, being that our local ordinance states that we have to source from a licensed facility. We don't want to have to go outside of our community, but unfortunately right now we are going to have to. So the sooner these businesses get permitted, the sooner we can purchase locally, and the sooner I can help our local economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Not seeing any motion to do so. And having agreed not to discuss the item, we're going to close these items and move on to the next. Thank you, public, for speaking. And we're going to move on to items 4 and 5, and I am going to recuse myself on items 4 and 5 for adjacency. And I'm going to turn the gavel over to Commissioner Sin.
Gavel accepted. All right, Leslie, do you want to come up? You'll want to pull the microphone close to you and speak pretty closely. And please identify yourself.
Hi there, I'm Leslie Dillaway, owner of Tiger Alley at 400 Broad Street. And I'm here to hopefully get our sign approved.
I can provide a little introduction. At the November meeting, business owner Leslie Dillaway was approved by the Planning Commission to repaint her building. She is now applying for a new hanging sign for the business named Tiger Alley, Vintage Curiosities. The sign will hang over the entrance on Broad Street using existing brackets. Sign material will be carved wood and painted. It'll be two-sided, approximately 21 square feet, including both sides. We'll have a graphic eyeball, and colors will be country redwood, Monticello rose, black, all of which are in the historical color palette, and then cut the mustard, which is not in the historical color palette, but it's a muted yellow tone.
Thank you. I'm still really fresh to protocol. Do I open this up to the public first?
You,
All right.
you can ask the applicant if she has anything more to add, and then open it to the public.
Leslie, do you have anything else to add to this?
Yes, our sign was installed last week without my knowledge. It was a Christmas present from the artist, so hopefully that's not an issue, but we can totally remove it if it is.
Thank you. I'm not aware if we've had any complaints about it being up yet.
Okay, cool.
Is there
It was a nice
anyone?
surprise.
Right. I think it's a very sweet Christmas present. Gesundheit. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak about the sign? No? Thank you. I'll bring it back to the table. What do you think, Dan?
I like, or I understand the graphic. I have a little trouble with the font, to be honest with you. I don't think it's very historical, and I can't really read it. I went by there today and saw the sign, and I couldn't really read it. So I think the font needs work, and the sign's already up. So that puts us in a really awkward spot.
Yeah, awkward spot indeed. The carved wood is beautiful. The color palette comports or close enough when it comes to cut the mustard, in my view. I suppose Parisian Metro is historical in some places. You know, I had a similar comment at a previous sort of sign situation where it's like, on the one hand, businesses ought to be able to have their brand, have their vision, have their style sort of communicate from their sign what's going on inside. And so in general, I certainly want to, lean on that and give a lot of latitude in sort of artistic creativity, but our job up here is actually a pretty narrow one. It's not really to say what we like or what we don't. It's really to as I understand it, to really zone in on the sort of the architectural review in terms of mother lode era. And so in addition to finding the font difficult to read, and again, in some ways it's like, that's just my opinion, I do struggle with it kind of comporting with what is generally and consistently, because it comes before us each and every month, a whole bunch of signs in downtown that do comport to the mother lode sort of style. So it's up, it's beautifully probably expensive. So again, it puts us in an awkward position, but I really wonder what the options are for a revision at this point, because it doesn't feel to be consistent, but I can be persuaded by other views in our small team today too.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add, Dan?
I'm just looking at the design guidelines for some fonts, so I'm going to hold for a moment.
All right.
Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm composing them. I mean, I've walked by it a few times, and I've thought about the eclectic nature in contrast to the mother lode design that is pretty. It's a staple of town and a mandate of the stable. And whether or not that really competes to a degree at which I think that with some modifications to the sign, it's not untenable to keep it up or approve it. And yeah, I'm still at a little bit of a loss. We don't have a whole lot of a cultural heritage of Parisian things other than Ike's Quarter Cafe, and they're pretty new in the long-term view. But I do love the sign. I think it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And in terms of legibility and changing it, it'd be really easy to just highlight it with that mustard yellow around the text. And I haven't looked at it closely enough to see if it could be tooled in a way to give it some sort of, I'll be a little crass and call it Western flair, but make it a little bit more Northern Californian than Parisian. But
Can I just add that
absolutely,
Parisian Art Nouveau was very inspiring to the early Victorian art. So that's kind of what I was going for, was more the Victorian style. But, I mean, it originated in France, but it was very much a part of the early Gold Rush era style.
Yeah, and maybe a similar argument can be made around the Art Deco era that dominates a few major features in our town, like the one we're in. So I do appreciate that. And again, I don't want to be resistant to it. I'm just trying to, as still the newest one here, kind of discharge my duties as I'm meant to. Obviously, there were no public comments of concern, so that's another thing that we're all meant to really pay attention to is what the public feels about anything that comes before us.
I mean, for me, the font is part of it, but it's also, the font's been taken and morphed, so it sort of is like a hybrid of, what would be the normal lettering, like in the Vintage Curiosities, and the image on the sign. And so it makes it really hard for me to read, and I mean, I can't really support it at this stage.
all right.
Yeah, well, I agree that the Vintage Curiosities font is, I assume that that's also Parisian Nouveau, and that's just straight, clean, I think compatible for sure with what else we have going in town. So, I mean, I guess in terms of your suggestion, Vice Chair Hawkinsnell, I guess we'd maybe put it back to the proponent of the sign here as to whether or not things like an outline is something that the artist can do, and if that's even, you know, does that make the grade if we feel it becomes a more legible sign with the same font? I mean, I don't know what sort of challenge the artist would have in accommodating that suggestion you had. Yeah.
Yeah, we could use a brighter yellow or something to outline the font, and I'm planning on installing spotlights so you can see it better, especially at night.
Well, part of me is remiss in, I mean, it's a pretty divisive application, and we are a stripped-down team. I would almost like to postpone this until we have a full cast to talk about it, and possibly to give Leslie some time to talk to the artist.
Keep in mind that Stuart won't.
He still won't be here.
He still won't be participating, but Josie may.
Well, I'm certainly open to staying this decision if that's what you call for. I'd support that. I think we do owe it to the applicant to give some pretty clear direction, though, and so that it's not just a stall with no resolution, no positive resolution at the end of another month. So, to say nothing of the fact that I certainly recognize that not having signage is a material consequence for a business. So I recognize that and have hesitancy there.
Well, for me, when it comes down to brass tacks, if I would approve it or not, regardless of anything being submitted, again, or like, for me, the big topic was like, is it too cartoony? And one of the things I really like about the sign is that it evokes this really nice, rich poster heritage, and there's so many photographs of Nevada City that like are striking like that. And I think, I don't want to go past my breach in this comment, but I think that like one of the issues that I've found with town and some of these restrictions that we go through are that we have some very plain signs, and they're not really inspired. I mean, this definitely is an inspired sign, and we have other signs like Mama Madrone's and other signs out there that are really, they're shaped, they're carved, and their texts are augmented. It's not just a straight line on a white board. And I think that that definitely enriches and, while is cartoony, like removes the Disneyland aspect of what Nevada City appears to be at times. I think that should be some food for thought. I think highlighting the text, I would totally approve this sign, but I also respect Dan's position on it. I think that those are some very valid points, but that's my hard line, and so for me, what I would like to do is have you talk to the artist and see what we can do about highlighting the font.
Sure. Just making it brighter or highlighting it with another color?
Just highlighting it, like outlining it. I think I would brighten it up and make it more legible.
Okay.
But I think that like going forward, if we're going to like hold it off another month, I'd like to hear from the other commissioners like what it would really take, whether this is like a no-go at all, or like what can be done.
Well, you know, part of what we do as commissioners is sit before the public and talk like this, because we're not allowed to under certain circumstances otherwise. So that's just to say that thank you for those perspectives and sort of the reminder that both Mother Madrone's and now thinking of the Halo sign as well. There's substantial, beautiful artistic signs that at some point with some commissioners passed the mother lode era test. And so that's an important one. I think I would, based on sort of thinking this through and hearing some of the arguments, I would be, I would support even a conditional passage at this time for, with the conditions being as you suggested, Vice Chair. If the sign could be, I think, more legible and maybe that'll taper some of the cartoony effect. I don't know. Just I'd be willing to approve it provisionally or conditionally, I should say, at this time. With full recognition that I just put Commissioner Thiem in a tough spot, but and I certainly share those concerns too.
Do you have anything else to add? Thank you. Yeah.
I just, it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys have the support amongst you to carry it forward.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then I won't stand in the way by not seconding the motion.
Yeah. Well, do you have a response to the Vice Chair's suggestion of what it would if we were to postpone it? I mean, again, it's not like we must get to consensus. That's not really our charge here. But you've raised valid points, and they're ones I'm definitely seeing both sides of that, and I just if you felt that there was something that could be done by the applicant between now and then.
I think I could probably work with the font. It's the tracing it around the eyeball that is problematic for me, and that's a pretty integral part of the design. So, excuse me. I feel like it becomes just too complicated for the mother lode look that we have throughout town. I leave it in your hands.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm willing to hear
A motion.
If you'd like to make one.
I move that we approve the sign with the condition that design considerations be given to a more legible kind of rendering of Tiger Alley, and that we assign a liaison from the commission to work on that, so that you don't have to come back here again in a month per se to do this again. That's sort of what the liaison role is meant, as I understand it, to be. So with the liaison and with that condition and guidance, I would make a motion to approve the sign.
I would accept this motion.
I have to second it first.
Oh, sorry.
I'll second it for you, Stefan.
Thank you so much, Dan. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed?
Me.
Note that it passes 2-1.
Thank you very much. I'll talk to the artist.
Okay.
And who's the liaison?
Who's the liaison? I'll be the liaison. I will.
Rock, paper, scissors.
No, I'll be the liaison. Leslie and I can work together on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there a representative from 205 York Street, the Tinnery? Hello. If you would please state your names to the microphone.
Yes, my name is Geneva Bigelow, and I'm co-founder of Health Evolution Technologies, developers of the AmpQuail technology, and I think my husband's name is on the application. However, he was called out of town last minute, so I'm here representing as well as the artists that we hired to design the sign and facilitate this process.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm Jiva. Nice to meet you guys.
Pleasure.
Okay, excuse me. In July of 2016, the Planning Commission approved architectural review for the remodel of the building known as the Tinnery, located at 205 York Street. Owner Rebecca Kaufman has been in the process of carrying out extensive interior and exterior improvements to the building. Aaron Bigelow, I guess representing is Geneva Bigelow, is applying for 2 signs for the business at AmpQuail, known as AmpQuail, offering sound therapy services. The business will occupy the front space of Kaufman's building, which has 2 entrances, one off York Street and the other off the south side of the building from the parking lot. Bigelow is proposing to hang a sign at the York Street entrance from an existing overhang. The south side entrance will have a wall-hung sign. Both signs will be carved and painted wood and feature primarily black lettering, though it will have a red and blue O letter. The hanging sign will be 2-sided and approximately 6.22 square feet, considering both sides. The wall sign will, of course, be 1-sided and be about approximately 10 square feet. Staff did advise that the applicant may want to consider a less modern font style for the Planning Commission's consideration, but this was the font that was presented in their staff report.
Thank you, Amy. Do you have anything further to add?
Oh, no, just whatever you guys got to share.
Thank you. I'll open up to public comment.
Lori Oberholzer, 310 Nevada Street. I was really here to speak about the Wyoming Street thing, but I won't have time to stay for that, it turns out. So I listened to the last application. I want to give you guys a pat on the back to hang tough on the sign regulations, which are, quite lengthy, actually. And, it's important to follow them because then it's easier the next time. You know all about that when the next person comes along. I did want to say about the last one, and this would apply to this one also, that in case you've forgotten, if there's lighting proposed, little spotlights or whatever on signs, it's supposed to be part of the application. And we see a lot of that they come along after the fact and they don't necessarily match the sign, or they're colored or they're too big or whatever. And there's good ways to do it. So that should just be part of the application. But on this one, I did want to direct you to, here's the sign design guidelines. I think they're longer than the regular design guidelines. And there's a couple things, obviously the mother lode era is what you're supposed to be hearkening after page 5 of the design guidelines. And then there's a whole thing on the whole logo issue. I don't know if this is the logo or not. It looks like a logo. And we dropped that real specific wording that we used to have in the sign ordinance. It actually said no logos, and that was what helped us with the Bank of America and Caldwell Banker and Beachhead Deli, so that we didn't get, real corporate-looking kinds of signage. And instead, we went with a wording that that included a lot of pictures that made it more obvious, or sort of why we are not too keen on logos, and that's on page 12 of the design guidelines. But it still says that new signs should emulate and be compatible with the design elements of the historic district and historic signs. And whether or not this is a logo, I think it really is too modern. We've never approved anything quite that modern, and we're still in the position where we have actually never approved a business logo. And I think it's a good idea to keep that precedent up. I think there's something really nice that could be designed for this site that represents their business well without being as modern as it is. So I hope you'll take that into consideration. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sally Harris, 625 Spring Street. On this and the one before, I would remind, especially for new people on the commission, is that what's supposed to be featured downtown is the architecture. And that's why signs are simple And that's why we don't have trees and other elements, is that what's unique to Nevada City that very few other towns in California have is the preserved architecture. So this idea that our signs are too simple, they're supposed to be, because they're supposed to be in the background. And I haven't looked at your sign, so I'm not going to say yay or nay, just general input. And once you start down the slope of granting things, it makes it harder to go back. So, you know, I did this for 10 years. Hang tough, and please protect the town. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? I'm going to close the public comments and bring it back to the table. Do you mind starting, Jason?
Well, my initial look at this too sort of comported with some of the comments that you just heard from the public. We in just last month we sort of turned down at least the fonts of one of the signs that looked to have some pretty similar fonts, at least with the A and whatnot. What I appreciate is there's a rustic quality to it as well, with sort of the grain of the wood being quite prominent, and so I do feel that modifies sort of the reaction that I have, and I think you heard. I let that instinct be real because the community has a long history of being sensitive around sort of the modernist or futuristic kind of imagery and signage. So I was hopeful that there might be some other options or alternatives to the font. And again, I don't presume to know what's all in the back of your mind in terms of the style you're bringing forward and your logo and all of the rest. I've just peeked into the window and see a real nice vibe in there. But this even with the grain and the wood and what seems like an attempt to sort of modulate what feels like a futuristic font, I was wondering and interested what an alternative might look like that would be responsive to the concerns I've expressed and ones that I think were mentioned from the citizens as well.
Thank you. Dan?
I'll just sort of echo the same thing. Stylistically, I like the sign, the simple outline on the, I think it was redwood, was it going to be? Yeah. My only suggestion to it is if you could use one of the historic fonts, and I'm looking specifically at the exotic line, is very similar to what you have, but it's I think a little bit more, well, it's more compliant with the Motherlode architecture. I'm thinking the right one, the 350 LTBT.
Well, our sign isn't in existence yet, so.
It seemed to me to be very close, maybe not, obviously not exact, but close to what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty modern to me, so if you guys are cool with that, then I don't think we'd have a problem with it. Yeah.
The reason I like that particular one is your sign is very clean and very easy to understand.
Just letters.
It's just letters. So I think it solves, the problem that we have here, which is complying with the ordinance and kind of, although not required, following, if we can, the design guidelines, but also making your sign fit the design elements that you want, which is a clean, simple look, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So that's my input.
So we're totally in alignment to just, work with that, and that's fine. What's the best procedure moving forward? Do we need to resubmit just the image with that font, or can we just use that font, or what?
Well, let's see how it all finalizes here at the table, but
how it usually shakes out is we'll talk about what we're comfortable with. Like if we're comfortable with that font adjustment, and then say, are you amenable to that? And you say, no, we can't work with that, or yeah, we can. Okay. And it's pretty fluid. And I mean, how do you feel about Did you get a chance to look at the font?
I didn't see the one that was suggested by.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I was looking over your shoulder, and I totally agree. I like it. I think that it'll fit in. You seem totally acquiescent to it.
Which one exactly is it?
It's on page 13. Exotic 350 light or LTBT.
Okay, the one in the.
I'm sure
Way
those
to the
stand
right.
for something of which I'm not positive. It's a sign.
Which means closing the line on the A, right?
Yeah.
Which may be a big deal, right? I don't know, for you all. Like, it may be, that's sort of, again, I don't know what you've put into your branding and all the rest, but.
I mean, our interest is to, support the historic feeling of the town, and if that makes everybody happy, I don't think it's, we'll continue to advertise as such elsewhere, but, I don't know if it will. I mean, we have a team that we work with, so we'll have to get everybody's thoughts on it, but I don't see it being like a monumental thing unless, that look is the look that we've been putting out, but,
I mean, there are a lot of businesses in town that have their sign and their brand that are not the same.
That's what I'm understanding.
For this reason.
For this very reason, yeah.
Or some actually choose to make their brand as part of their sign once the sign's kind of compliant. It just depends on what your business is and what you're trying to achieve with your marketing, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Our brand is already well established, so I think.
You might have to move that closer because they get.
Our brand is
reviews.
already well established, so I think for this purpose, for the headquarters office and being in Nevada City, it's having it comply is more important to us than our brand. It's not, yeah.
Make our community happy.
Yeah,
that's
it's.
fine.
Okay.
We're not here in Nevada City to build a brand, it's
Right,
here just
right.
to have the headquarters and be a part of the communities, share that, so
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Have we heard from you?
No, I've been waiting in the shadows. I like it. I like how clean it is. I think it doesn't detract from the architecture of the building, which I also love a lot. And it's welcoming. I mean, it's still like, it resonates the same openness that like you got out of like some open black windows and doors. I mean, it's a really nice space. And I like having the balance of you guys still having a clean sign and us being within the guidelines. So if you're willing to take the recommendation of this font and someone's willing to put forth a motion to accept the application with that, I'd support it.
Can I just get clarification, Amy? Because there's two different entrances, that's why we're allowed two different sign locations?
Two entrances and two sides of the building, I believe is the way but yes, you are allowed to consider two.
They're small, I mean, they fit, so.
Yeah, they're
what do you think?
well under the signs. I'm okay with that solution.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to put forward?
I move that we approve the sign with the condition that the font used be from the sign guidelines Exotic 350 LTBT, special code name. And should we appoint a liaison for that? Probably we should, just so we can get a final workup of it and then approve it.
Okay. Does anyone want to be a liaison or
I'll volunteer for that one.
beautiful man?
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a motion seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 3-0. You have 15-day waiting period, but you'll be in contact with Dan.
Or Amy specifically.
Amy.
She'll sort it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. My bat signal.
Oh.
I relinquish all duties of the chairmanship back to Stuart.
Now that you've got through the tough stuff.
Well done.
Thank Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is tree removal, and we see we have none.
None.
Is this the first time in the entire time I've been here? I think so.
Maybe.
Next item is architectural reviews, number 775 Zion Street, City of Nevada City owner.
I'll introduce it, but then I'll let our consulting engineer take over. The property is owned by the city. The building was originally built in the 1930s. The site is now being leased by the owners of the SPD Saw Shop, who will relocate their business from 120 Argyle Way. The building is a metal building with a corrugated metal roof. The building is not represented on the Nevada City Sanborn map of 1898. While staff does not have an accurate site plan, based on an aerial photograph review, the existing building does appear to meet all of our setback standards. The saw shop owners are requesting to add a 720 square foot enclosed storage area to the front of the building, similar to the enclosure that they currently have at their Argyle Way business. The enclosure will allow them to store and test gas-powered equipment, and particularly important in times of inclement weather, so they could safely turn on gas-powered equipment. They're proposing to use a cyclone fencing material covered by a shed roof, and I'll turn it over to consulting engineer Bill Falcone, who can maybe add some more to the report.
Members of the commission, as you may or may not know, from what Amy said, the city inherited that from the Caltrans 40 years ago or 45 years ago, and we used it as a public works yard for a number of years. And then we moved to the other public works yard, which we inherited from the county at the top of Boulder Street. When we did that, we turned the facility at Zion Street into the D&D plumbing was there for years. It's basically a warehouse where Caltrans had parked vehicles for years, and there's a Quonset hut in the back. It's a very large piece of property. We don't plan on changing basically anything. We're all way within setbacks because there's so much room out front and out back and on the sides. The city still will maintain some of its valuable items on some of the property. Corrugated metal the building was made out of corrugated metal. We plan on continuing that. Most of you know that the city has quite an inventory of corrugated metal that we picked up over the years. Some of it was from the barn that was actually on the site that we're sitting right now, and some of it was KFMR and different ones we picked up. So we'll be using our own tin. The the SPD Saw Shop has been down there in that area since the 50s, and I understand that the brewery needs to expand, and he would rather be up there on our corner, so he does want to have an area in the front where he wants to, as Amy said, and when the weather's bad, he can start a motor or something like that, or look at something that somebody brings in. Basically, that front would look similar to what the SPD Saw Shop looks today, where you go in that little corridor there, which is open, so that if he has a motor running, it has air coming through it. He's amenable. I've talked to him, and the city, of course, is in charge, so we're amenable to whatever the commission would like to see additionally.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
I'd like to open that up to the public. If somebody would like to comment on this, now is the time to do so. Please come to the microphone. I'm not seeing much movement, so we'll bring this back to the table. Do you have anything else you'd like to add, Amy?
Nope, I don't. I'm looking at these.
Well, I certainly don't have concerns about adding some more sort of usable covered square footage. That makes sense, and as you've pointed out, Mr. Falcone, the setbacks are extreme in that little parcel. So I got to say, maybe it's just a deep-seated bias, but I'm not a real big cyclone fence fan. So I get that there needs to be air movement. That's the whole purpose of kind of the expansion.
That's exactly right.
And, so it's sort of whether hog wire or something like that is more appropriate or maybe not as secure. I understand there might be security questions around his choice in the material and the design he's using. And am I understanding correctly, this also becomes sort of the entrance. You end up going through.
That's exactly right.
And that I don't know. It just seems like there was maybe a better idea on the design.
Jason, I don't think the kind of fence makes any difference to him. So
yeah.
I think that's where you guys earn your keep. You tell me what you want, we'll put it up there. I mean,
yeah.
Doesn't matter where. You're right. He does want it secure, and he is going to fence some of that back lot with cyclone, but you won't see that from the street. The front street's pretty well fenced already. But in any event, whatever the commission so desires, just give us instruction and we'll take care of it. The canopy and everything will just be a continuing of the same roof. You'll never see anything different with anything else. Can't use tin on that front anymore because he has to have air. So some way he has to have air.
Right.
And I assume he's going to be doing test cutting in there as well. So it needs to be a fence that can take some hits if chips fly out.
Yes. He will do a bit of everything.
So
That's what he does for a living.
That's probably why the cyclone fence is a big matter, because it's a pretty heavy gauge and it's strong metal. But
well, that was just my initial reaction. I think with the roofing and the continuation as shown in these designs seems fine with me, and would just love to hear some more from other commissioners. Again, almost from just the perspective of a business owner, giving some consideration to whether or not your patrons want to walk through something that looks kind of like a prison staging area before you get in. I guess his decision ultimately, but. Maybe we could give them some advice on that.
I don't think guys who fix their chainsaws that are care much.
Yeah. So one of the things is, I'm wondering, is it all going to be bare metal on the front, or is he going to do any painting to it at all?
Well, I say we
that
could.
Outcropping?
No, I don't think it'll be bare, and nothing will be bare.
Because we could paint the fence too.
Paint it.
And that'll that'll mitigate. I mean, it won't be like
galvanized
steel staring at you.
It's not going to be like a chain link fence that you would see. It would all be covered. Maybe what we need to do, and you guys tell me, but maybe we have somebody here represented come take a look, and we'll decide what to put on there.
Yeah.
Bring it back or whatever you want to do. I don't care.
What are the fencing options?
Where's
the catalog?
The rest of it, we're within the setback.
Yeah.
We're not adding any more square footage than we already have land for. We have nothing. There is no other issues.
I personally like the chain link fence.
I knew it. It's a flannel.
No, I mean, that's what makes the saw shop the saw shop.
And that's the thing about the basement is it's such a little cage.
You're not going to church on Sunday, so
has anybody ever been in that building? That building is.
I love that building. What are we doing with
old and funky? I mean,
that building, not because the city owns it, but that building is a perfect place for the SPD saw shop.
You'll never know it wasn't there for 50 years already. I'm in support of it, with maybe some decorative culverts or something. I don't know.
Well,
I think we should let him do it.
It's pretty far back from the road.
It's about 150 feet back.
Doesn't it already have a cyclone fence in front of it?
Yeah. Well, that's
it's overground.
That's when Caltrans staged all its vehicles when the days before the freeway.
Yes, I can live with it. I was the first to speak, and hey, I think we should talk about what cyclone fences, a wall of cyclone fence looks like.
Hey, we're not here to browbeat.
We did that on purpose to make you on record.
Yeah, and I'm fine to go into the saw shop as I do and live with my statement here as we move forward. But if there are some coatings, and again, I don't know if we're actually talking about some kind of, if it's just paint or some kind of coating, but I think anything to those are my concerns, and they're not so strongly held that I will land on this chain link sword.
You're not going to fall on this.
Yes.
What are your thoughts, Stuart?
It's pretty far back there. I'm not sure anybody's really
It's
gonna
pretty far back there.
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody's going to really see it very much. However, I am certainly amenable to a moderate effort made to look at some various options if that's possible.
We have no problem with that.
Okay.
And you want to be the guy that comes, looks at them?
Unfortunately, it looks like I volunteered myself for that. So yes, I will.
We'll look at that.
Okay.
All right.
With that condition,
A condition to coat or paint.
if
Yeah, well, Jason and.
With the condition
the
to
city will
source
work
findings
together
of if
to
it's
figure out-
necessary to beautify the structure.
Probably be a vinyl covered is probably where it'll wind up. My thought.
I mean, I don't think there are too many options that are going to be worse, right? So I'd be comfortable approving the
Yes.
project, and
Yes.
then if they come up with some way to beautify that fantastic property, then go for it.
I so second that.
would you like to make that a motion?
I move that we approve the addition as presented with the opportunity to improve as Commissioner Rainey so chooses with the bill.
I second that motion.
It's moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Thank you.
Passes 4-0. Thank you, Bill. And is there a 15-day appeal period for the city of Nevada City also?
I believe that.
Just kidding. Moving on to architectural review number 7, 900 Zion Street, Trudy Chandler, owner, carport conversion.
And this is where we have a phone consultation with the applicant. So give me just a couple minutes, I'll give her a call.
Would you like to have a 5-minute recess?
Get that much time.
Okay.
Unless you guys
In that time.
Okay. Oh, good.
Unless it's not plugged in.
Take a look over it. Should be. Working?
Got something?
What's the matter? Is it working?
You want my phone?
Give me the number. I'll get it.
I'm sorry, I think we have actually the wrong number. Sorry about that.
Isn't that what's better?
919.
Huh?
Wrong number, Bill.
Oh, 619. Huh?
It's not too long.
We did the same thing the other day, I think.
Is the refrigerator ready?
You got Prince Charles in a can, or no, what was that, Joe?
Yeah, that was it. That was it right there. Let him know.
Something like that. Okay. King Edward in a can.
We could have just used whoever answered. What the difference? She wouldn't have known. All right. Let's try that one. Hello?
Hi, Trudy. You are on the public record with the Planning Commission right now.
Okay, thank you.
And if you can just introduce yourself to the Planning Commission, and I'll introduce your project.
Okay, my name is Trudy Chandler. I reside in San Diego, California, and I have a home here in Nevada City at 900 Zion Street. And I also have with me my partner, Ralph Peters, who lives in Chula Vista and who has helped me throughout the years. And
Hi, Trudy. Thank you. This is Stuart Lauders, Chair of the Planning Commission. Amy's going to introduce the project for us.
Thank you. The subject residence is not depicted on the 1898 Nevada City Sanborn map. The structure has historically been used as a residence, so the zoning is office professional. This designation allows for residential densities at a maximum of 4 units per acres, so the use can be considered as to be conforming to the zoning designation. The owner is proposing to convert the one-car carport to living space, amounting to an addition of approximately 149 square feet. They are also proposing a small addition to the rear of the structure to accommodate a bathroom and laundry room remodel, amounting to a 32 square foot addition. The additions and the existing structure will all meet all required setback standards. The residential uses are required to be served by 2 designated off-street parking spaces, so staff is recommending that the applicant amend the site plan to delineate the replacement parking space.
Can you, before we go any farther with discussion, can you describe to us and to the public what those regulations are and why we want 2 spaces?
Well, every residence, any new residence is required to have 2 parking spaces. Any existing residences that already have those 2 parking spaces are required to retain them. In this case, staff presumes that the carport is serving as one of those spaces, and a portion of the driveway is serving another one. So in the end, the site plan should show two designated spaces for off-street parking for the residents.
Stuart, I've already reviewed it, and she has the room. It just needs to be delineated.
Okay, great, thank you. And Trudy, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we open this up to the public? Yes, we can hear you. Okay, thank you. This time I'd like to open this project up to the public. If somebody would like to comment on this item, please do so now. Please come to the microphone. And I don't see anybody coming forward, so we're going to bring this back to the table. And Commissioner Hawkins-Snell, do you have any comments on this?
I don't.
Okay. Are you, is that a...
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, no,
Is it okay the way it...
It's okay the way it is presented, in my opinion.
Okay.
We've got room.
Commissioner Rainey.
Yeah, I think I'm now clear. For a moment, originally I thought that that porch area was also going to be an extension. So I now see that I misunderstood that. So we're just looking at a garage. The only square foot extension are those 2 feet or whatever number of square feet in the back. Yeah.
There is a porch off the front. I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I thought that was maybe that the proposal included enclosing that, but that is not the case.
Not including.
We looked at it from a staff level, and the staff has no problems with it, and it's within all the setbacks and everything, but we felt that there was more being done to the building than with a corridor like that than we should do. So that's why we brought it.
Can you explain to us where would what would accommodate the second car? Is it
to the right here, right there. There's already a spot. It's already there.
It's already there. Great. So there's no special accommodation needed here at all.
There's already a spot where you park, Trudy, on the side there, on the side of the garage, between you and the fence.
Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. We have to show that as an additional parking spot.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Are you okay?
I'm okay now.
Okay. You were the last person to speak on this.
I overheard while I was recovering from a coughing fit, some of the other commentary, and I'm in support of the project. The parking sounds like it's been resolved or was a non-issue. I think stylistically it works, so I'm in favor of the project.
Thank you. I, too, have no additional comments. It looks pretty straightforward, and I can't see any issues that I need to comment on. With that, I'd certainly entertain a motion to approve this project as presented.
Well, I make that motion to approve this project as presented.
Do we need to say anything to accommodate?
I think I included a condition for the delineation, and so as already conditioned in the staff report, it's fine.
Okay.
Well, with that, I second that motion, if that's what I.
Yeah, as conditioned in the staff report, I accept this application.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. You got your approval, Trudy. We have a 15-day appeal period, but after that, please go forward.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate the accommodation with this phone call. So, super possible for me.
Happy holidays to you, and enjoys the weather in San Diego.
Thank you. Happy holidays to all of you.
All right. Thanks, Trudy.
Bye now.
Just as a little sideline for all of you, whatever, that house was built by Bob Payne, the former mayor of Nevada City. And that's his niece that inherited it after he passed away, so that's his house. Just for a little sideline.
Terrific, thank you. It's important to have those historical connections for all of us, even if we're a little removed from it at this point. Next item on the agenda is 301 Woodpecker Architectural Review, Julie and Kent Schomig, owners, addition to existing residence. Hi, please introduce yourself.
I'm Chris Andrews I'm the owner of Chris Andrews Drafting, representing Kurt and Julie Schomig, the owners.
Would you introduce the project, please?
Sure. The subject residence at 301 Woodpecker Lane is not depicted on the 1898 Sanborn map. Property owners Julie and Kurt Schomig are proposing to add 350 square feet of additional floor area above an existing utility room and dining room. They are proposing to use materials that are consistent with the existing residence, which is T111 siding, Plygium vinyl windows, 1x4 trim around the windows, and a composition shingle roof. The addition will require a new roof line extending from the existing front elevation gable, and the addition is essentially going above where an existing overfloor deck is currently. So there's no expansion of the overall footprint of the house.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just want to note that we're maintaining the existing finishes on it, and the new roof line is going to be gable in form, matching the rest of the house.
This time I'd like to open this project up for public comment. If somebody would like to speak on this project, please come forward to the microphone. And I don't see any movement, so I'm going to bring this back to the table. Commissioner Thiem.
I like this project too. I feel like that little deck was almost designed to have a room above it. So I think stylistically it also matches the existing building, so I'm in support of the project.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and you know, Woodpecker Lane is definitely tucked away, so with no comments from any neighbors or otherwise, I agree. I think on its own, it seems like a sensible project and one I support.
I too have no questions, comments, or corrections. Although the materials aren't normally the materials we would ask for, they are the existing materials on the house, and you are planning to match them, and that's excellent news. We don't always hear that. So with that, and no corrections, no obvious corrections, would there be any need to have a liaison on this project at all?
It's up to you, but if you're not really asking me to make changes.
Yeah, sounds like nothing controversial here. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the architectural review of this project as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It's passed 4-0. We have a 15-day appeal period. If you could hold off building for 15 days, that would be awesome.
I'll hold them back.
Okay, all right.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item is the discussion item for 377 Wyoming Road, a preliminary review. Do we have anybody who'd like to speak to that?
No, you're the representatives.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Yvonne Reed, owner of 377 Wyoming Road. And I'm here to get some direction and your general feedback before we proceed in the official drawing up of engineering and architectural plans.
Thank you. Amy, do you have anything to add?
Sure, yes. At the September 2016 meeting, the Planning Commission voted to continue an architectural review application until a more comprehensive plan that includes a variance proposal and a design that was more in keeping with Nevada City architecture was submitted by the applicant. The owners have been working with staff to develop a design that is consistent with that Planning Commission direction. Property owners Yvonne and Ron Reed are seeking direction today before they spend additional time and resources on professional level designs. Recently, the applicant brought a design concept forward to the planning and engineering staff that reduced the footprint within the steep slopes and shifts the residents into the 100-foot setback area of Deer Creek. Staff has advised that the applicant provide a biological assessment for that encroachment into the 100-foot setback of the creek. But the purpose today is in reviewing the findings needed for the commission to support a variance, particularly with the steep slopes. Staff has concerns regarding the current conceptual design and the extension of the driveway into areas with steep slopes, whereby the extension of that driveway is not necessary to meet municipal code standards. The applicant is therefore seeking direction on whether or not the Planning Commission could consider supporting a variance for improvements within a sensitive resource when those improvements are not necessarily required by code. In order to approve a variance, the Planning Commission will need to make the finding that there are conditions which would make the strict enforcement of the provisions of the zoning ordinance result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship, or would deny the property owner of a reasonable use of the property. So staff doesn't have any concern about finding those conditions, but whether or not those conditions are resulting in a necessary hardship that would necessitate extending a driveway beyond what's required by code is where staff has some concerns.
And just for clarification purposes, this is not actually an action item for us either.
Right, thank you.
This is just an opinion item for us. We're providing our opinions to the applicant.
That's correct. And to be fair, the applicant has provided, designs to us, and they're spending money, and so before they go on and spend additional resources, I think they're hoping to get some direction so that it can advise them on how to proceed before they put a lot of effort and resources into this.
Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to open this up to the public. If the public would like to share some views about this project, of this proposed project, now's the time to do so.
I'm Nancy Bliley. I live at 265 Giles Street in Nevada City, just in the same neighborhood as the Reed property. And I'm really looking forward to having Ron and Yvonne as neighbors. And I also really value the creek and am concerned about variance that would, well, in granting variances, when there's really been consideration given to the 100-foot setback and the steep slope building, and it just seems like a serious matter to me to not respect those decisions that have been set up as guidelines for us.
Thank you.
My name's Nancy Fleming. I live at 498 Jordan Street, which is immediately across the creek from the Reed's property. And I'm also the president of the board of directors for Sierra Streams Institute, which began back about 20 years ago as the Friends of Deer Creek. So that's sort of the origins of where our heart is as an institute. I have a concern. I have a concern with manipulation of that site from a number of perspectives. I have a concern about cutting too much slope from a stability perspective, but I have more concern about a fairly extensive portion of that house, the whole eastern wing, being out, majority of it or most of it's out over a 3-to-1 slope. Again, as Nancy Bliley mentioned, I feel like we have these ordinances for a very strong reason, because we need to protect our environment. Deer Creek is our origins. That's where we came from as a community, the reason for being. And we need to protect it. We need to protect its health, which has to do with everything from its stability of its slopes and the vegetation. I feel like, again, a variance, as has been said a couple of times already in this meeting, you create variance or allow variances, and you have set a precedent that then, from then on, is very hard to argue against for the next person that wants to build. And so I feel like I know the intent of the variance is for when a variance is awarded, that it's because there is an impact that can't be worked around on a particular site. And I feel that there are ways to address this situation other than building over and into 3-to-1 slopes. Maybe there's just too much square footage being forced on a site that can't really accommodate it. But I'd very much hope that there be another way to work the site than with a variance. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Sam Gitchell at 265 Giles Street, and really want to echo both the positive comments of my wife Nancy about Ron and Yvonne Reed and welcoming them to the neighborhood, and the concerns the two Nancys just brought up. I just want to add one other observation, that this is a very high stakes project in that it is on the Tribute Trail. So whatever happens there will be viewed by lots and lots of Nevada City residents and visitors, and will really reflect on Nevada City. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Smiley, I live at 498 Jordan Street. I've spoken to you in the past about this project, and I started by saying, and I'll say it again, that I am a supporter of having a house on that property. I think it's good that we get somebody living on that property who can maintain it. We've had a wildfire started by homeless. We were living across the creek from it. We had a homeless wildfire started a couple years back. So we need somebody, and there are other antisocial activities that happen on that property because the property owners aren't there to be able to take care of it. So I think having a residence there is a good idea, barring any other ways to maintain the property. But I'm not in favor of encroaching on the 100-foot setback on the creek. This is a very large site. And it surely is possible to accommodate the program without encroaching into that 100-foot setback. And I don't believe that it's necessary to encroach, as is shown at least in the drawings that I think I'm up to date on, in such a way for the property owner to enjoy the use of their property. There's other ways to design this. I'm a landscape architect, and I've done a lot of site planning on steep slopes. And as I look at the plan, I think the thing that's the sort of the fatal flaw are the garages. I think if you look, when you look at a residence and the way people, in the part that people live in, you can accommodate the program for people, for the various rooms that people need on steep slopes without a great big footprint. But cars are a different problem. They're a fixed unit and a fixed size, and when you put two of them or more on a site, suddenly you get these big blocks. And so I think the other thing that it appears to me from a design point of view that's driving this encroachment is the access for these automobiles and the storage of these automobiles. And there's a good reason why oftentimes you see in steep slope situations the program is split apart. It's broken apart. The garages will be away from the main building. And I understand many people like to have all their garages attached to drive in. It's all warm. But this could well be a situation where some of that garage program needs to be broken away from the main mass of the program, from the residential program, the spaces that people actually live in, and separate that. And get those garages so that they're not driving this encroachment. Because I think there's no reason on a site that big to encroach into that 100-foot setback. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Denise Della Santina. I'm the restoration ecologist and botanist at Sierra Streams Institute. And I've been out to visit this site. It was actually brought to our awareness from a community member who is a member of Sierra Streams. And so my first impression on driving out to this site was just a very big concern about erosion, just on driving, what does, in fact, looking at, the tribute trail, even erosion to the tribute trail, and how is that going to be mitigated in these soils that are often very difficult to get vegetation to reestablish on. So that would be mainly what I've seen up by the road area. And so, well, I guess maybe I should take a step back. So that was my first impression on this. And then I looked further into the plans and the ordinances and then what was being requested. And as a scientist and understanding, how these ordinances were discussed and agreed upon, I imagine there was a large panel of people that had talked about it and the impacts to the creek. And so I personally, as a scientist and someone who has seen the impacts of erosion on creeks and Deer Creek, really believe that we should not be going outside of any ordinance. That was set for a reason, to protect our creek, and all of the water quality impacts that could happen from not irresponsible, but maybe not the best planning, and that could happen to the fish, the biological systems down there, as well as the numerous mines. I'm a little concerned about the seepage. I don't know if there has been testing on the water and any sort of mine features in the area, but that is definitely one thing that we have seen a lot on Deer Creek. So that would be something that I'd like to see answered. If there was a variance to, well, in any I guess, possibility of building on the site. I think we should understand, what the consequences are of perhaps legacy mines. Another thing that I was thinking about with the large amount of pavement, I was first thinking that wow, that's a lot of pavement, and that causes a lot of when we get large storms, fast-moving water that causes severe erosion on steep slopes, and once that erosion starts, it's almost impossible to stop. It's very difficult. So the best thing is to prevent it in the beginning. And even if, the project goes forward with, within our county or city ordinance, which I would hope, I would, in addition, like to see some things in building sites like this, and that would include like permeable pavement or other ways to spread that water flow, because these, when you get like really saturated and then really dry, steep slopes like this, that's when we're gonna see our erosion, not only on the landowner, but then into the creek. So looking into other ways to keep that water within the area, to support the vegetation, to support our pine trees. Just because you're leaving a pine tree there next to an area that's been built in doesn't mean it's going to survive. Our pines are under severe stress right now, and anything that sort of alters the hydrology could impact their health. And then we already know that there is a major problem with bark beetle infestation in this area of Deer Creek. And I guess, so the permeable pavement, and then really what I would like to highlight is how to, slow sink and spread the water rather than just getting it, preventing it from going straight down. So other things I'd like to see actually even added to the ordinance in areas that are steep are, things like permeable pavement, and then also really looking at the water inlets. How many water inlets and outlets are there? Are we like consolidating them all into one area?
Can I slow you down for a minute?
Yeah.
We're not going to be addressing any ordinances.
Okay.
Revising them in any way. If you'd like to, I think those are great suggestions.
Yeah, that's fine.
Please
I'm just
take them
talking.
to the city council to revise an ordinance. But your
okay, that's fine. Yeah, I
observations
understand.
on this particular project are important.
Yeah, so that's, I would also apply them to this project if for any, reason there was a variance. Ways to increase the number of inlets and outlets. So, and also buffering those outlets more than like, a couple rocks, but actually, buffering them with rock, getting some geotechnical engineering with, maybe some native plants. I would, there are ways that we can reduce the impacts of pavement and buildings on slopes, whether they're within or outside of the building ordinance. And I would be happy to answer any questions in the future on this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm John Daly, and I live at 302 Drummond Street, just up the hill from this property in Deer Creek. I can walk down there and have been on this property many times. It's a lovely property. And I've always been kind of wondering when a house is going to be built there, and it's going to be a nice spot. I've been a realtor here in Nevada County for 35 years and have dealt with variances that have been approved and that have not been approved. And in this case, for example, if you were going to ask for a small variance near water where it was level land or close to level land, that's often been granted, I've seen. In this case, I'm concerned about the steepness of the property with the encroachment over the 100-foot setback. And as we just heard, I have also been thinking about erosion and water and drainage and the water rushing down the driveways, the cement driveways and so forth. Those are all very important, and maybe those have been taken into consideration. I haven't heard. There are houses further down Old Downeyville Highway that have been built recently in the last 10 years. They didn't get close enough to the stream, and they were on some steep lines, and they didn't get close enough to the stream to cause a requirement for variance. Also has been said is that Deer Creek is part of our heritage. It's one of our jewels here in Nevada County, just like the Yuba River. I'm also a photographer, and I'm down there a lot photographing Deer Creek, and I would hate to see any changes in that ecosystem there through erosion, through any tree fall and so forth. We have seen tree fall right across from my house when a house was built. Came to this chamber about that house being built and that heritage oak that was there. And when even had a arborist required to come out and look at that heritage oak. And yet within 6 months of that house being built, that tree went over, or fell and completely blocked American Hill Road. So these are real concerns, and I've seen them right across the street from my house. So I just wanted to put that out. I think there are solutions to this, and I would be in favor of those solutions and working with the builders and the homeowners and glad to welcome them into the neighborhood. But I wanted to raise those same issues that other people have also raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
John's taller than I am. Hello, I'm Linda Sutter, and I live at 318 Drummond Street. I'm very familiar with this property. In fact, back in the day, I used to bring my children, this was 30 years ago, to swim in this creek along this property. I have extreme concerns about the variance that's being requested for a number of reasons. But for the protectionism of this creek, it was created for a reason. And it should remain, that this is a creek that the entire community is a part of, that we have annual Scotch broom poles to protect that area. We monitor the trees from beetle bark and remove anything that might create a fire. We monitor the water on a monthly basis. We take our children down there. We have photographers. This creek is extremely important. I have concerns about the massiveness of this project in so many capacities, but for today, please do not create any kind of a variance that's been established to protect this creek at this point. Thank you.
Sally Harris, 625 Spring Street, and I welcome you to our community, and I, like Michael Smiley, agree that it'll be good to have a house on that property for a variety of reasons. For the Planning Commission, it's a very big deal to grant variances. You shouldn't do it lightly, and typically it has not. About 15 years ago, there were variances being handed out pretty freely, and some citizens rose up and said, we don't want this. Now, the more you do it, the more people will ask for it, and it will erode our community over time. So I would strongly urge you to not grant variances unless it truly is a hardship. And nothing I've seen so far tells me that it meets that standard. So I agree with pretty much everything everyone said. I do want to go from a slightly different direction here. I was a little shocked when I saw the agenda and pulled it up online that you're here to discuss this. And so there's no actual official public hearing where the neighbors would have been notified. And that's why it's agendized this way, because otherwise people would have been notified, and you might have had 40 or 50 people in here. This is a very poor way to make a decision. So if we hadn't
It's not an action item. I think we were pretty clear on that in the beginning.
Let me finish, Stuart.
You will be.
Let me finish. So let's say today that you thought, oh, it's nice, we want something there. And you started that direction of saying, maybe we'll consider a variance, because that's what's being asked in the staff report. Let's say you did that. Then they spend a whole bunch of money, they come back, it's publicly noticed, mail goes out to people, and they're like, oh my God, no, we don't want this. Puts you in a very awkward position at that point. So I'm against this approach. I think
it's time. I think you've passed your 3-minute mark here, and you've been a little bit abusive to us. So let me cut you off here and tell you, when this becomes an action item, you will be notified in the proper manner, as we do with all of our action items for people in the vicinity. This person is here asking our opinion.
I don't mean to be rude.
You are, though.
And you already allowed someone else about 10 minutes. So
she wasn't rude to us.
Well, I apologize. I actually am not intending to be rude. What I'm doing is challenging the way staff agendizes for you. That's what I'm doing. Not criticizing you, but saying this is not good process if you want the trust of the public and the cooperation.
If you want the trust of the public, come when it's notified then. It will be notified to you properly. We do it every time we have an action item, you get notified.
So I think you're being very rude, and
Sorry.
I don't understand it.
I apologize.
So again, back to the topic. Please, please don't give direction that a variance might be okay. Thank you.
Again, for the public, please stick to the items at hand, the agenda items. If you don't like the process, that's appropriate to appeal to the Planning Commission or to the City Council, and I invite you to do that if you'd like to do that. Note that you will be notified, all the neighbors in, what's the
300 feet for a public notice.
For any actioned item in the Planning Commission, you will be and you are notified. When a member of the public, a member of the community is thinking about a project and is trying to accommodate the needs of their project and the needs of the community in light of all of the various requirements of code within the city, they're asking for some direction. I think it's perfectly appropriate for them to come and ask for some direction. I think it's great. I'm certainly glad that the public feels comfortable enough to do that. When they're proposing a project, they're not asking for action, they're looking for direction. And we're trying to do our best with that. You know, we're all volunteers, and we're trying to do our best with that. If you don't like the process, that's a different issue. And please go to the City Council or propose something different. But when we have an action item, you will be notified. Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
My name is Barbara Romer. I live at 327 American Hill Road, which is above the property that you're proposing to build on. I too have spent 50 years in this community on the waterways. I take my grandsons down to your property. I was there 2 days ago and walked as far as I could walk with the new channelizing by NID and was really dismayed. I think this argument might turn, apart from the variance issue, or maybe preceding the variance issue, might turn on the fact that our waterways are such a precious resource to the community. I am among those people who would not receive notice because I live too remotely from the property, although I'm in easy walking distance and virtually a stone's throw from it. So I encourage you to exercise the same circumspection that I've seen this body exercise in coming before you before, and to look very closely at granting or not granting any variance because of the steep slope and the proximity to the creek. It's a resource that we all treasure, and we like it treated with respect while we welcome you to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this particular issue? If not, I'll bring it back to the table.
Can I speak again? Can I step up again? Is that...
Sure.
I'd just like to say that I understand that you're volunteers, and I appreciate how difficult this job is. And as volunteers, I would imagine that when you have to make a decision, that you would want as much information as possible in order to make a decision that works for everyone. At both ends, that as a builder too, when you are trying to create your plans and figure out what direction you're going to move in, that you also want to know where you're going to land. So you're not spending thousands of dollars creating plans that the community is going to rise up against. So I think this is an important conversation. And I do understand Sally's concern about process, because it's good to come forth with all of the information on the table initially so people know how to move and in what direction to move. And it's difficult when we're all working in our separate compartments, us as a community, you as volunteers trying to do the best job that you possibly can, and the people who are trying to build their home. So anyway, so thank you so very, very much for listening to our input. And I hope that we can all move forward together and all get on the same footing at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I've already brought it back to the table, there we are. At this point, would you like to add any additional comments?
Yeah, I just want to, because I can appreciate the concern about not having all the information, and I certainly am not suggesting that the commission make any decisions today because they don't have all the architectural drawings or the final designs in front of them. But just so you have an idea of why we're here, the Reeds did come back trying to understand the direction that the Planning Commission gave them back in September 2016. With the design concept, they'd spent some additional funds on those, and staff had some issues, and so then Mrs. Reed came back with another concept, the concept that's before you now, after staff had kind of given her some feedback on the other design concept. And so rather than sending her back, and as you can see in my staff report, I have some concerns about the supportability of the variance. And so rather than sending her back through another design process, we did feel it was prudent to come to the commission and get some direction before they spend additional resources.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Stuart?
Yes.
In all fairness to Mrs. Reed, she has been before the staff a number of times, and we've met with her, and she's made some concessions and some changes. We as a staff felt that we were committing to ideas that we thought were beyond our scope, and we thought that we should bring it to you all so that you could study it, and that's all we're doing here today. So we just felt that, we can't keep giving direction in places that we can't vote on, so that's why we're here.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
First, I'd like to thank everybody for coming and just seeing what's involved and going on. I appreciate the neighborhood. I appreciate the neighbors that I have met. We're really excited to be able to live there. We too highly value the creek in the area, which is of course why we want to live there and build a home. It is all of our intention and goal to care for the creek and be as diligent and follow all of the instruction and guidelines that we can, and so that is definitely our goal. I think all of us have the same goal. It's just figuring out the end product. We have spent 2 years in the design phase of this project. In September, we submitted a complete architectural review package. I don't know, I assumed you got that and saw it. And then you provided me with feedback, right? Okay, so we have met at the property with the city engineers and with Amy many times. And it was from the feedback, it was from your feedback that this current design came up to encroach on the creek setback in lieu of moving so much dirt, in lieu of the slope, minimizing the slope and grading process. So this design is based on the feedback that we received from you in September. And it is my understanding that it would be less disruptive to the environment to build on existing flat, previously disturbed areas than to try to do more grading. And so we've minimized that a lot, and we went ahead and submitted this design with the variance for creek setback in mind that exists over the existing previously graded area, flat area.
Thank you for that clarification.
So thank you for letting me be here, and I would appreciate your comments. And I'm also wondering if it's possible to be assigned a liaison, because I feel like we need to touch base more than once a month in a public forum. It would be helpful.
I think that's a great suggestion, but that needs to be coordinated through Amy as well, so that every topic you're talking about is already sort of going through the official channels before it goes to a liaison.
I'm in communication regularly with Amy.
Yeah.
We work
Just
well
wanted to
together.
make that clear that it wouldn't circumvent the planner, the city planner. Would anyone else like to speak on this sort of generally as to what we need to do as the next step here? Dan, do you have any thoughts?
I'm not quite ready yet.
Okay, all right. Stefan?
Just in general, excuse me, my initial thought is that I'm pretty uncomfortable with cutting into the setback of the creek.
Just to be clear, there is no cut. There is absolutely no grading.
I mean having any structure in it.
Okay,
at all.
there would be some footings in that area, a supported footing within the area, but there's no cut,
No,
no
I
grade,
understand what you're saying.
no disturbance other than that.
The building extend over that setback.
Right.
That's the language I should have used. I'm sorry.
Stuart, you always ask, historically, this property does not appear on the Sanborn map because frankly, in the days when the Sanborn map was made, it's too far out of town, which is really the town. The main reason for the Sanborn map was fires in the downtown. That level of where you see the flat area, there was a series of cabins in there over the years and even a couple of trailers when I was younger. And you'll see, if you look at your topo map, you'll see little stairways here and there, and they're all around. And they were used to get in and out of the cabins and stuff. So this has been that's why you get this flat area, and that's what we were trying to encourage was construction on the flat area that had the little dwellings years ago that have gone away.
Is there any evidence of mining in this?
No, I don't see it there, no.
Okay. And refresh my memory. We're asking that if such a thing is possible, we would require some kind of environmental impact survey, environmental impact report, EIR kind of thing?
No, I mean, it would be subject to, variance is subject to CEQA, so we would have to do the CEQA assessment to determine what level of review But because, so staff had encouraged the applicants to, if they could reduce the encroachment into 30% slopes, to shift the building potentially into the 100-foot setback where the area was already disturbed. So that, when staff said we could support that if the purpose was to reduce the steep slopes and it was on already disturbed area. The way the current conceptual plan is drawn out, there's also an area of encroachment into areas that are not, not graded flat anyhow. And so because of that, I had advised that they get a biological assessment of those areas in particular, for those areas specifically that encroach into the 100-foot setback. In terms of special studies needed for the 30% slopes, they'll have some kind of geotechnical engineering, and I think they've done already a preliminary geotechnical study of that area.
And I'd like to address a comment about the garages. In the plan submitted in September, the garage was in a different location, and because of that would have required some additional grading into the 30% slope, and because of the fire department regulations, it was advised to us to move the garage as close towards the entrance of our driveway as possible to minimize that disturbance. So we did that. And the fire department requires a certain amount of space to be able to get their vehicle in and to back out, and it's their requirement that we have to meet.
Although I'm sorry.
That's not quite true, actually.
Well,
that's more of a justification than a reason.
There is.
If there was nothing there would be no reason to have.
There is a requirement to have a fire-safe driveway to access
driveway. Right.
And they have to have a 150-foot arc, available to them.
Okay.
What staff's concern in terms of this conceptual design is primarily with the extension of the driveway beyond what's required by fire code. Into and if the extension was just on the non-disturbed or the already disturbed graded area, I don't think we'd have any issue. But it's that area that I've highlighted in yellow that's 30% slopes. That's where staff is having some concern supporting the variance.
So that variance, though, is for the 30% slope development, not for the 100-foot.
There would be two,
right?
Yeah, there would be two variance requests. One for the 100-foot.
But that
setback.
yellow portion is not within the 100-foot,
right?
Correct.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So it looks to me that the portion that's within the 100-foot setback, by and large, is already on pre-graded terrain. And then there's the one portion of the new proposed garage where I presume those are perimeter footings. They're coming up and then building up. They're not actually cutting into that slope. Am I right in that?
Again, we don't have the final designs yet, but that is how it's been represented to staff by the applicants, that it will be not a cut slope, but footings that step up with the slope.
I'd like to make sure that I clarify and that we're all on the same page. Let me see here. If you're looking at the portion that is closest to the existing driveway, on the east side, the farthest east side, there will be small cut in that area. The lower level is going to be at about 2430 elevation, and I want to say that's about 2443 or something like that. So that corner there would be cut and retained. But that's sort of right on the borderline of the setback. So part of that's within the 100-foot creek setback.
Jason, you've been patient. What would you say?
Yeah, well, a number of things, perhaps. First is just to say that I joined the Planning Commission, Mrs. Reed, in July of this year, so I was not part of the review earlier. A process question has been raised by the public, and however we might land on that, I'm here today grateful for the opportunity to get a preview of what is a high-profile project in our town and in our Deer Creek watershed. While I gladly sign up as a volunteer for the commission, I also recognize that the people that come and speak on either behalf of a project or with concerns also volunteer their time, and these meetings take place in the middle of the day. And so I appreciate in this opportunity to get sort of oriented to your project that there was considerable input already, knowing that there wasn't yet a notification, and also knowing that there are probably a lot of people who have interest in what happens on your property that won't ever be able to take time off in the afternoon.
We recently had a neighborhood Christmas party, and so we were discussing it. And
Oh, good. So there's...
I wasn't sure if notice was going to go out or not, because Amy had mentioned it.
No, and I'm
I
not...
don't know. I did make sure that Sierra Stream Institute knew about it, so, I did try to let people know.
Yeah, well, good. And I don't, and again, I'm just sort of reflecting on my appreciation for the public that did come out and for your role in generating that. That's great. It sounds like you've got some relationships that are building with your neighbors. I also appreciate what you've said about your concern about erosion, and it sounds like we've given you, in the past, this body has given you some direction to take that into account. I think, again, any of us who walk dogs along Wyoming Road know that it just takes one November storm to produce some evidence of the mobility of some of those soils. And since you're here to get, again, just preliminary guidance without, specific architectural plans, I'll just give you my guidance that I would be very reluctant to issue creek variances on any circumstances. And I think that the folks from the public who have pointed out, particularly a variance on a slope like this being cause for extra caution, is something that I would consider as well. The parcel itself is steep sloped. It is over 3.5 acres. I imagine in your 2 years you have come across a lot of design challenges with this, and I certainly appreciate you in good collaborative spirit coming before this committee to see where we stand on this and trying to be responsive to the direction you received in the past. But I would, my advice is to encourage a kind of footprint that keeps you within the setback and looks to find the right footprint on this site, given those constraints.
Thank you. And just a correction, it's 4.76 acres.
Oh, okay.
total. There's more than one parcel.
Okay.
It's kind of divided up.
Yeah, thank you. I do acknowledge that I'm in a learning phase with your project coming in late, so thank you.
So I arrived today thinking this is death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's sort of a little bit at a time over a long period of time, and we're going to suffer through instead of kind of getting a bigger picture. And I think that was my initial takeaway was I don't feel like I have enough information about what the final project could look like over these lines to even give you much of a response. I realize this looks like the edge of a house. I'd sure like to know what the underpinnings look like. I'd like to know what kind of erosion report looks like. I'm not sure the erosion is going to look any different over the line than it is above the line. I mean, I'm assuming that's going to be the same. It doesn't change via altitude, although that part of the site has been fairly heavily disturbed. If I were to take just my opinion at this point, if I were to take a look at this, I would say I'd be more okay with, taking away a little section of dirt than I would be going over the 100-foot line, personally. That's how I'm looking at it at this point. And if it could all be pulled back to the 100-foot setback from the creek, that would make me a lot more comfortable.
With our last design proposal, if we stay within the creek setback, then in order to access the back part of our property, then that requires we have to move the driveway, the existing driveway, uphill, which requires some grading. So that was in the proposal that we sent in September, and the feedback was you didn't want that much grading. You would rather us build on the flat part. So we can design. We just need to know where to build the house and what we can do.
Yeah, that's a
I
fair
think it's a very fair question, and we're getting conflicting information, and we've spent a lot of time and resources, so we just need to know where we can build the house, keeping in mind that we really want to maintain road, vehicle, tractor access to the back part of the property.
Mr. Chairman, may I chime in?
Sure.
I think one of the struggles we're working with here is that on the one hand, you have what is an after-the-fact, not arbitrary, but certainly an after-the-fact setback that's created for a property which previously has already been graded. So if you're looking at site disturbance, and the principle behind site disturbance that setback represents, in my mind doesn't really carry the same weight now, because we already have a flat section there. We're going to create more disturbance by saying pull it back within that 100 feet and cut into the hillside. But what that brings up is that you have a limited amount of space on this particular site, period. So you're trying to fit a very large house in a fairly small spot. And so when you get over to this section where we're cutting into the 30% slope to maintain the access back to some already graded areas on the backside of the property, that's required because of the length and the size of the house. My view is that could be shrunk by about 15 feet. I mean, the last proposal was 4,600 square feet, and I don't know if that even included the garage. So I think the scale could be brought down a little bit where the existing grade of the road would provide access back to the already flat spot of the rest of the property and limit some of that encroachment into the 100-foot. I think it's well.
So reducing the size of that wing on the far end of the house there a bit.
Are you talking about the west end?
I'm talking
by
about
the yellow highlighted
correct,
area.
by the yellow start. I mean,
Yeah, that's right now. That's a garage shop. It's a lower level. It's a two-story. Part of the house is two-story. That's on the lower level. The shape of that can change a bit.
But I guess what I'm getting at is you've got the corner of that shop that's driving the driveway into the hill, right?
Right.
And that's.
Well, we didn't want to go further towards the creek either.
Right, no, I understand that. And the shop is located on really what's a pretty flat area already. So that part I like. If there's a way to reduce that shop size so that you don't have to cut into that hillside so much, then you've got access to that entire thing. Or maybe even having a shop separate over here to the west, I guess. with a driveway that comes in between it. I don't know, but it's a fairly large footprint to fit on a very constrained site without doing substantial site work. And I think there's a fair bit of concern, either in cutting too much into the 30% or encroaching too much into the 100-foot setback. I personally am okay being in that 100-foot setback, provided it doesn't, or it stays on what is relatively flat already. It makes more sense to me to keep what's flat, flat, than take out a hillside just for this, this line.
Thank you. And I feel like there's a balance, in a middle way. We just have to kind of keep figuring out what that balance is going to be between this, the slope and the creek.
Can I ask, with the concept you have here, what is envisioned now as the square footage of the home? I mean, maybe you haven't gotten that far because you're just working with the footprint, but is there an update on that?
Yeah, I don't know, because this is my hand drawing, actually. We've cut out square footage, so I want to say that's around 4,000, but I don't know for sure.
So you're looking for some direction.
I'm looking for some direction. I know that my neighbors have done it. They have creek front homes. So I know it can be done. We just have to figure out how to get there.
So are the, not trying to lean one way or the other, but are there variances towards the creek in that general neighborhood with other properties?
I have not been on staff since those properties have been developed. I do think there's one down the road that did receive a variance. I don't know the exact circumstances, but I do think it was for 30% slopes.
The neighbor immediately to the east of me is within that space, but I think she's been grandfathered in. It was an old time.
All of that stuff is before zoning.
Right.
I'm at the risk of discouraging you even further. I just want to say that, the setbacks do exist for a reason, and of course variances can be granted, but when it comes to these waterways, I think you've heard from some of the community and from me that it's a pretty serious line to cross. It's not for me to say, but if we were to start from scratch, and took it as a given that variance would not be granted, we might be looking at a totally different site plan for your 3 or 4 acres, And again, you're asking for direction, and I'm not saying that this is the direction I give. It's probable that you can get a footprint down there that stays within the variance, but again, in a different reality, we might be looking at a home up closer to, even, I guess it would be north of Wyoming Road, and leaving all that area down there just for your garden or something. That's not the kind of advice you want to hear from me, but I just want to set the context that this is what we're looking at. But, I think I'm just reiterating that I think that the setback is a real constraint that needs to be considered for site development here.
Did you see the architectural plans we submitted in September?
I didn't see the plans, and I probably should have gone back to those, but I sort of thought this was
This is a complete
just an opening
redesign.
Total redesign.
I have them here. If you
and I probably can find them online too from the
the meeting from last year, so.
No,
and-
that's a complete redesign as well.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah. And again, I'm not giving you direction on that. I'm just trying to characterize the
well,
importance of
I'm
that
here for
setback.
direction, but
Yeah.
And I'm happy to meet with anybody on the site, or, I just need to know where to go next. There's a lot of restrictions, a lot of setbacks. There's rocks there to think about that don't show up. There's views to think
Trees,
about that don't
yeah.
show up. There's shade and all, there's lots and lots of factors and variables. And Amy and Brian and I sat at the property for a long time thinking this over, trying to figure out what would be, the best approach. And this isn't maybe, exactly, there was nothing on paper, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, and that's what I sort of acknowledge and respect, that there are so many variables that someone like me can't see. So when I say I don't mean to give you direction, I know you're asking for it, but I don't know how big that rock is or where that tree, and you do, and others do, and I'm just sort of emphasizing the point about the variance.
I appreciate it, because if you're thinking it, somebody else is.
Yeah.
You were asking about that setback. This is just my opinion, but in my opinion, I support what my neighbor here says, and that is that if you, in those areas where she is encroaching in the 100-foot setback, the areas that have already been graded and already have walls on them will cause less degradation to the creek than to have big cuts on the upper side. So there's kind of a trade-off there. Especially like where your garage is. You see that? Mm-hmm. She's in the 100-foot setback, but she's on the flat part in front of the wall.
And I know it's hard to see this, but the garage is on the upper level, so it's up high as you come off the street, living space underneath.
Mm-hmm. For what is identified as the proposed garage or the shop on the
proposed garage.
Mm-hmm. But Bill, you were referring to the what's labeled as the shop, right? And being in that flat area.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, I know.
Shrink it.
It's a tough one, and if you could be a little more specific as to
Shrink it to fit within that setback and be able to build up. I mean, that's a lot of house to slap on a very steep plot.
if we could shrink it. The part that's difficult is maintaining access to the back part of the property.
Yeah.
Because it's not that big of an area, the existed grading area.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't design your project for you. All we can give you is guidance on what we think the direction we would like you to go.
Right. When Amy met with me out at the property, she had highlighted like a footprint, and that was really helpful. So that's what we used to come up with this concept, maybe with a little bit of tweaking to the garage shop area. So that's what we used, and that's what would be really helpful, is to know the area. And I realize that I've spent 2 years on this, and you've had 15 minutes, and it's really hard because it's a really difficult site design and project. And I'm happy to sit down and spend more time with you, but this was the form that was recommended.
We've had many meetings with her.
So let me, Bill, the area sort of under and behind the proposed garage space, is that pre-graded? Has that been disturbed already? Is that disturbed space?
No.
That is not disturbed, that's okay.
Just the flat
Just
areas.
the flat areas,
That
okay.
other is pretty much all unnatural. Now, you know, when you asked me earlier, is there mining activity? There was mining activity everywhere, but this is not historically heavily mined.
I see. So anything, what is this, east of the main part of the residence, this whole proposed garage area, that's virginal area, hasn't been disturbed right there, okay.
And extremely steep, yeah, extremely steep. And you go to go to the east or go to the left of what your picture is on the screen.
So are what we really seeing here on that topographic, on those topographic lines, is that really gonna be cut in for a lower level? Is that what I understand?
At what part are you?
Sorry, the proposed garage space?
Yes, so that will
That's
be
really
cut in.
cut in. That's not slope.
Nope, that will be cut in with a retaining wall, you'd flatten it out and then they drive across and in directly into the garage.
Okay.
That will be on an upper level.
Got it, thank you.
Part of that will be cut, like I said, because of the raised bottom foundation.
And can I ask, aside from the yellowed area that you're considering grading, sort of moving back upslope or north, sorry, it's an upside down map.
Uphill.
Yeah, uphill. Your primary reason for not considering a footprint that moves into that area is because of the direction you received from this group in the past, or are there other constraints that of the site or your design considerations that prevented you from that?
Building uphill?
Yeah, like orienting, like if you were forced to make your rough footprint get within the variance, for example, well, it requires you to grade on that steep uphill slope, right? And so I'm just wondering, and it's clear that we as a body cautioned you against that because of erosion concerns, and I'm just wondering if there were other concerns. And the question is coming from one of the reasons that a variance exists is because of the scientific presumption that the closer you get to a waterway, the greater chance that a disturbance is actually going to impact that waterway. And so I'm not a big fan of lots of disturbances anywhere this close. I mean, 100 feet is something we all go by. Nature doesn't always. But anyway, it was just sort of in an effort to try to help give you some more suggestions from the individuals that comprise this body. My sense, without having investigated it personally and actually not having technical background in this, is that there might be, if you were to come back up slope a bit, get out of the 100-foot variance there, or the 100-foot buffer, that there might, and took into some consideration some of the best practices, some of which have been cited by the public here, that you might be able to manage that erosion and that cut in a way that keeps you further away from the creek and accomplishes some set of what you're trying to accomplish with your.
I agree with you. That is an option.
I think I'm personally landing on the idea that if we're going to grant a variance for special dispensation, that's because the property can't be enjoyed or used in the same way as the neighbors with identical, whatever the terminology was, identical classification. I think it's hard to justify encroaching into that with such a large property or footprint. I think this is probably double the size of any house in that vicinity, which is part of the reason that we're in this constraint. You know, we're talking about either moving it back into the 30% 50% slope, or we're moving it forward into the 100-foot setback. And that's all given because of the size of the house that you want to build. And it might just be that the site doesn't support a house that large. So I'm okay being in that 100-foot setback if it's already pre-disturbed and flattened space. I feel like that doesn't, it's going to create the least amount of impact on the watershed. But, you know, the variable in here is as much the size of the house as it is the constraints of the property, in my opinion. So if I were to give you direction, I would say try a smaller footprint that fits on the flat part already. That's what I feel. It solves a lot of all of these problems. It may not, I understand that may not fit with what you guys want from your dream home. But that is a constraint that I see in this property that makes it hard to go much bigger, or even that big.
Yeah.
See, if we go out into the 100-foot setback, then we have that issue as a variance issue. The more, and so the more we go back into the slope, we have that as a variance issue. So there's two variance issues that you have to deal with here no matter what. One is the steep slope that you're not going to get away with in some of it, and the other one is the flat area. And I do agree with Dan that I don't have as big a problem in the flat area working as I do in cutting the slopes. I'm sorry, but
Yeah, totally.
I do have a neighbor immediately to the east, my neighbor on Monroe Street, who's, you know, it's a steep, the whole area is steep. And her current home is larger than this proposed home.
It's not the 4,600 square feet?
This is not that. This is not this home that's
Okay, then
proposed. It was proposed in September.
Okay.
And you're right, you need a square footage, I guess. This is a two-story, approximately 4,000 square foot home. And the neighbor, 2 houses down to the west, I don't remember the exact figures, but I want to say it's around 3,500 living space, and very steep, and all of them are steep that are on the creek.
I mean, we'd have to check at it because that's only part of the picture. It's whether those are encroaching in the variance setbacks that are required, you know. Is it steep? Is it 30% steep? Is it within the 100-foot? All of those things, I don't know. I mean, I don't have enough information. I'd have to look at them. But in terms of my direction, I'm much more comfortable supporting a footprint that is on an existing or very close to the existing flat area, even if that flat area encroaches in the 100-foot setback, personally. I'm open to the idea of splitting the square footage out so that it follows the contour of the existing grade. You know, for example, the workshop, you know, if that could be split off a little bit, then that might allow you to bend the shape to fit that particular area. Ultimately, I'm going to need more information and maybe stake it out, come out to the property to see where you're looking at. That's my 2 cents. There we go.
One of the challenges that we have is trying to maintain access to the backside of our property. 2 years ago or longer, when we met with Amy and Bill, our first meeting, and the city lawyer, and I asked for an easement to get from Monroe Street to access the property, so that way we didn't have to drive on Wyoming Road at all. We didn't have to disturb Tribute Trail at all. We could access it from Monroe Street. That was denied, so we've been doing our best to try to accommodate that and to maintain access to the backside of our property.
And just so I can be clear, because you've raised it twice, so it sounds like it's an important consideration, but I don't know that I understand it. But by the backside, you mean
The west side.
accessing the west side, which, for example, the yellow cut area, right, would create access to get back to the rest of that flat
Right.
area? Is that what you're referring
Right.
to? Okay. Just wanted to-
That's for the road.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
When you say access to that area, do you mean with a vehicle? Do you mean you want to be able to drive throughout your property? Is that-
Yeah, with a vehicle, tractor, if we need to do work back there, maintenance, tree work. It's very, very difficult to get to if you didn't have that.
Technically, she could build a second unit because the lot is plenty big and she has enough flat area there to the west. So, I mean, that
Exactly.
there's potential for that too. I mean, if it was, our ordinances allow you to have a second unit with adequate size lot and area.
All there.
She's out of the 100-foot setback and
Yep.
she's got a couple of flat areas.
Like that.
So I don't know if this is a consensus or not, but I'm reading a good reaction to what Dan and Bill have said. If there was some way to get it away from the yellow, so we don't have to cut in, keep it on the flat area, if at all possible. If the areas that are flat appear to have been disturbed, we might support a variance for the areas that have already been disturbed. Beyond that, we may have difficulty finding a consensus to support anything else. Am I reading?
Well, I don't know that it's our job to provide a consensus right now, actually. So, I mean, I sort of thought that the read was, what are the 4 of the 5 individuals who are ultimately going to be making this decision, and you know what you got to do. You've got to get 3 of us to approve it, and like we know the so I think we've kind of given our personal. I appreciate you trying to summarize it. I don't know that you captured actually my view, but you don't need to. Also, Stuart. Yeah. So right. I mean, am I wrong about?
No, I think
where we are?
you are not interested in it going over the 100-foot line.
That's right. I mean, I think I've said all that makes sense for me to say based on what I know and based on where we are in this process. Yeah. So, and I'm just whether it's the right view or not, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that it's your responsibility to try to make a consensus statement from us right now.
Well,
For the
I don't know if the consensus is right, but I think she is looking for some direction, and I think we're going to try and give her something to work with a little bit. Call it direction or consensus, as you will.
One of my questions that I had before I leave is also the next step. So this was, my hand-drawn footprint to get feedback. So based on the feedback that I'm receiving today, revise the footprint. And then if we do the formal application for variance, what will you require at that time? Will you accept a hand-drawn footprint? It'll have to be engineered and architecturally drawn? Will you want reports submitted with it? What is it that you're going to want when I submit that?
City planner will answer your question.
We will need reports, and it kind of depends on what the final design looks like. If it's encroaching to the 100-foot setback, generally biological assessment, 30% slopes, generally a geological assessment. And it will be subject to CEQA, so we'll have to prepare an environmental report in that regard. But we will need, because it's a site plan, we will need the full design plans for them before they can take final action on the plan.
On the variance, This is not for the architectural review, I'm just talking about the variance.
I mean, and I would probably advise that we hear the variance at the same time we hear the architectural review component.
And I totally understand that. However, I don't know if you understand that it's going to take months and months and months and tens of thousands of dollars to do that. So that's why I'm asking, what's the minimum required? Because we've been here twice before, you know.
The short answer to that question is if you design something that's within the setback of the 100-foot and doesn't require a variance on the 30% slope, then it becomes an architectural review. That's the short answer to that question. So the reason we are constrained in having the hearing that we're having is because your request is to basically encroach on areas which require a variance. So what we need from you is the full set of information that allows us to provide an environmental report, for one, and then two, a complete picture of what that will look like in order to generate enough information and enough public input, excuse me, to decide whether or not a variance is appropriate and applicable. If that's something you're not willing to invest in, and trust me, I know how much it costs, personally know how much it costs, then I would recommend, from my point of view, that you change your design to fit within the constraints of the ordinance. That simplifies most of those problems. That's speaking for me.
I appreciate the way you summarized it. You know, when this comes more formally before us as well, it hasn't been really our requirement today at this stage to sound in on the question of, again, if you choose to request a variance for either of those reasons, for slope or setback, that it's an unnecessary hardship or would deny you reasonable use of the property and those sorts of questions. So I can imagine that, again, if you are coming forward with some plan, you're going to need to come forward with a level of plans that allow us to sort of, you know, there's going to be comment and then we're going to have questions of, is 4,600-foot home, like, is that the hardship we're trying to make a decision about? So, I mean, we're going to need those details when it comes to that. You know, garage plus workshop or what, like, suddenly those become, you know, questions that have to come onto the table because that's the determination we're required to make if we're to issue a waiver of the setback or a variance of the setback.
I don't think it can be said any better than that. I think that's right. If you want to avoid having to come up with a variance for either, or asking us to address a variance for either, keep it away from either side, and then we make it easy on you and cheaper on you. But when either is crossed over, we have to deal with all of it. So, sorry, that's the reality of the situation. So, it's sort of still the same, I think the same scenario. Try to keep it away from both sides.
Okay, thank you. Is there someone that can be a liaison?
Again, first go through Amy and.
Typically, we don't have a liaison for something, but if you guys feel that someone can help guide, you know, during the design process, I don't know. It feels a little premature, but I'm certainly willing to entertain someone to help guide but I feel capable of guiding her to some extent also. So
I mean, I think the issue is a liaison's not going to be in a position to make any sort of determination on the applicability of a design in the variance process. You know, that is going to have to come before the commission no matter what. So you know, if you're looking for somebody to say, hey, yeah, I think this will float, they can only really speak for themselves. And that's by design so that it can happen in a public forum. I think, to be honest, excuse me, the city's staff are as well, or if not more, equipped to make those recommendations than we are. And it maintains the integrity and independence of this body when it comes to the variance hearing, that, you know, we've had our deliberations in public with as much publicly accessible information as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. And we move on to liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports?
I don't think we have anything new. Nobody has anything new, I don't think. Nope, none.
You made a little noise.
No, I don't think I have any liaison responsibilities at this moment.
Staff approvals and determinations. Nothing looks very challenging there.
I did realize I forgot one, and there may have been more because this was a fairly challenging month for me. But there was a window replacement like for like on Mill Street. So if you hear banging around, that's what that is.
Was there any correspondence?
No, just
Received.
League of Cities correspondence that you got.
I think that's for your exclusive use, Stuart.
The chair and
the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama needs to tell me to calm down. Next regular meeting is January 18th, 2017. That's my sister's birthday. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I second that.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.